Ken Blackford is a longtime hobbyist gardener, now retired from his regular job, and he's now working full-time at his hobby, is what he said. So he started in the Bay Area. And by the time he got here to San Diego, he was already growing Amaryllis belladonna, and he expanded his interest into the South African geophytes in the Amaryllidaceae. Did I say that right? And others. And so I'm going to let him tell you all about it. So please welcome Ken Blackford.
Evening. There's something on my. Uh-oh, what did I do? Oh, or did you do that? In any case, that's the opening frame. So, I think Karen said I moved from Northern California. I used to live in the Bay Area, and that's where I first got interested in Amaryllis belladonna. Can you hear me better? Yeah. I had a roommate 40 years ago who said, "Oh, you should grow some naked ladies." I said, "What?" And he said, "Amaryllis belladonna, they're great for our climate." And he says, "I can dig some up from my parents' house." And he did, and that got me turned on to the Amaryllids. And since I moved down here, as Karen said, I've kind of expanded. So, and I wouldn't say I have a new top favorite, but this picture that's showing is Boophone distica, and I'll say it's my number 2 favorite among the South African Amaryllids. So today I'm going to say, just mention some of the ones that I grow that are well suited to San Diego's climate. And we'll go through them, and then I have a few other non-Amaryllids that I'll mention. So it's just a list of them. I made the larger type, the plants that I'm more interested in, or easier to grow, I should say. This is down the street from me after I moved into my Bay Park neighborhood. And one of my neighbors had these naked ladies, Amaryllis belladonna, growing at the next corner. And I just always thought that they were pretty spectacular when they bloom. Usually for me here, it's usually the end of July to early August. I brought in a few that I have in my garden now. They're very late this year. Maybe you've all had the same experience. That one vase has got everything that was blooming in my yard as of today, and I should have hundreds of them. That one, yeah. So there's many variations on the common pink naked ladies. There's been a lot of hybridizing. There's some almost red, or maybe you should say deep pink, and white ones, and then variations with picotees and striations. So these are a couple in my own yard. I got these from a gentleman who lived up north. He's since passed, Wayne Roderick. You may have heard his name. There's a lot of plants that are actually named for him now. He was a horticulturalist up there. I think he worked for UC Berkeley for a while, and then the East Bay Regional Parks District. He gave me these plants that he obtained from his mother, who lived like somewhere in the Bay Area. So these are some of my own hybrids. They're very pale pink, with a really thick, the one on the left anyways, thick, waxy, curled petals. And that's one of my favorite hybrids. These shots are from the LA County Arboretum in Arcadia. They do give them some summer water. It's not necessary. But you can see that they're great for dry areas. The only possible thing that isn't great is the dead leaves, which you can clear up. And you can see some variations in the colors there. I'm a plant nerd, so I also like the seeds that they produce. They're kind of pearl-like, and when they're exposed to the sun, they develop some of the red colorations from the, I guess, the anthocyanins that are in the seeds. There was some thought at some time that the red seeds gave you redder colored flowers. That has not been my experience. And then again, my interest in the seeds. You can make a bouquet out of the seeds themselves, the infrutescences. If you're not familiar with them, the requirements are full sun, PM shade if you're inland. They do tolerate light frost. When I lived up north, in 1990, we had a very severe freeze, stayed below freezing for 3 days. And this is in Concord, outside of San Francisco. The leaves, which grow in the winter, were all defoliated. They suffered from the frost, but it did not kill the bulbs. They all came back. They'll take many soil types. I'd almost say any, but good drainage is essential. I've given a lot of bulbs away, and I gave some to some coworkers. And he says, they're not blooming. So I went over to his house and he planted them like daffodils, to which they're actually related, but he planted them a foot down, and they need to be planted with the tips right at the soil surface. He says they produce leaves every year, but they never flowered. Well, he dug them up, replanted them the correct way, and they bloomed the following year. So, and again, they're summer growers, or excuse me, winter growers. They don't need any summer H2O, but you can mix them with plants if you have them in an irrigated garden, and they will tolerate it as long as the drainage is good. This next plant you're probably all familiar with, the Agapanthus africanus. It's in the same family, or at least it used to be. When I lived up north, I used to see these planted with the naked ladies. So the leaves of the Agapanthus would provide cover for the bare naked ladies. And the combination of the two I thought was pretty nice. You had these blue, or almost Wedgwood blue, and the light pink with the naked ladies, and it made a nice combination. Going on again beyond the Amaryllis belladonna, this plant, this species Amaryllis, is another Amarylid from South Africa. It's not too common, but you can see the flowers are somewhat similar. It's more of a collector's plant, and the leaves are more prostrate along the ground. I've got a couple of these growing. They have not flowered for me in the 20 years I've been here. So, but I've had other people say they'll flower. Maybe. Yeah. I talked to Mike Masterson, who was one of the gardeners at the San Diego Zoo, and I saw his bloom for years. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So, and then here's my second love, the Bouphones, or Bouophones. You can pronounce this several ways, and if you want to get into an argument with other plant nerds, this is the way to do it. You could say they're Bouophones, which is the correct pronunciation according to Richard Dowd, who's now passed, but he wrote a book on Cape bulbs. You can just say Bouphane, which sometimes you'll see it spelled that way, or Boophone. And there are two species. There's Distica, and all the shots in this picture are Distica in bloom. And the foliage is actually, in my opinion, as interesting, if not more interesting than the bloom itself. And I don't have a good design sense. I picked a little bit up over the years, but these are pretty striking. If you can find a way to work it into your garden, I think they'll stand out. I always have people in my neighborhood say, "What are those?" So actually going back to that, something I learned, because again, I don't have the natural design sense, but if you can plant them, they tend to maintain that same plane throughout their life. They don't turn each year. So if you can plant them all in the same plane, they tend to look a little better. Again, I'm a seed freak. These are the seed heads or infructescences of the Boophone. There's a few I brought in on the table, some dried, and there's one there that is I just picked out of the garden today that's got a few seeds in it. But they work well, in my opinion, in succulent gardens since they don't need as much water as other eastern plants. Here's some of the dried infructescences. One year I didn't collect them in time, and we had a windy day, and several of them blew down the street, and my neighbors had them and didn't know what they were, but they thought they were kind of cool. So the other Boophone species is Hymanthoides. Sometimes it's just called the yellow Boophone. It opens yellow and it kind of tends to turn pinkish as the plume matures. It is a strict winter grower. The disticas that I grow tend to be almost evergreen, but that's because I did some crossing between winter growers and summer growers. But the Boophone Hymanthoides are strict winter growers. And in the summer, all you see are these bare bulbs. They need to be planted at the soil surface, and I'd say at least 2/3 to 3/4 of the bulb develops above the surface. And the leaves on the Hymanthoides, I think, are a little more impressive than the Distica. They're wider and they're a little bit larger, and they have a larger spread or fan. So, but again, also interesting. These were some that I had grown from seed. I originally got my seed from Silver Hill Seeds in South Africa. I think I got those. Oh, it says right there, 2007s. So it took 10 years for them to bloom for me, which is maybe typical, but I have since found out that if you up-pot them aggressively or plant them in the ground, they will bloom faster or mature faster. And you might get some blooms on this species within 7 years. The Disticas, I've normally bloom after 7 years, but I've had them bloom as early as 4 years from seed. Again, if you aggressively up-pot them and maybe give them some fertilizer, they'll bloom and mature earlier. Those are the naked bulbs in the summer. I can't remember if that's before or post bloom, but that's what they look like. So you have to plan for that if you're going to plant in your garden. So, and then the seed head is very similar to the Boophone Distica seed head. So again, good drainage, at least a half a day of sunlight, good air circulation, low organic mix in your soil. Don't give them a lot of organic material. If you have it in your soil below the roots, that's fine. They can grow into it without a problem. I've actually used manure, well-rotted manure, below the bulbs, and I think they actually appreciate that. But you don't want the bulb to be touching that manure. You want them to let the roots grow into it. And you need a large area for root run. These are not plants for pots. I've had people argue that point with me, but my opinion is they generally won't bloom on their own. I've seen them at shows in pots blooming, and in almost every situation they've been dug, the roots have been cut, and they've been put into a pot. The roots in the ground will extend out a good 6 feet in all directions. Water sparingly, and they will tolerate light frosts below 27, 28 degrees. If you get a frost, that might damage the leaves. You can plant them in cooler areas if you plant them under the drip line, the south-facing drip line of a tree, and that'll usually provide enough, here in San Diego anyways, enough protection so that they won't suffer any. The other Amarylid species from, or group of species from South Africa that I like are the Brunsvigias. There are 8 to 10, I think there are more than that, different species. I only grow 4 of them. They have upright leaves, some of them, and others are prostrate. They lay flat on the ground and spread out. I have other pictures coming up. And most of them are winter growers, the ones that are adapted to our climate. You want the winter growers. So Josephini is probably the largest of the Brunsvigias. I obtained my seeds originally from Wayne Roderick when I still lived up north, and brought them down here. They took 10 years to bloom, but again, that's a little long. I think you can get them to bloom quicker or mature quicker if you aggressively uppot them. That's the foliage in my garden here. More foliage of the Brunsvigia Josephini. Wide leaves, kind of blue-gray. Interesting. And then these are the bare bulbs in the summer. Again, you have the naked bulbs. They grow about 1/2 to 2/3 above the soil surface. So you have to account for that if you're working it into your garden. And these are the bare bulbs starting to produce their flowers. Usually in August, late August to September here for us. As the bud grows, it'll start to spread and open up, and you'll have up to 50 different individual florets. For me, it's just exciting to watch these things grow. And I've got them in my succulent garden. They seem to do well there. So, and there they are in bloom. They're pretty spectacular. So. More in bloom, and then a close-up of the individual flowers. And again, I'm a seed nut. I'm very interested in the fruit they produce and the seeds in them. They look like peas. So I've gone overboard with taking pictures of them. The seeds of all of these species are recalcitrant, meaning they want to germinate immediately or within a couple months. In South Africa, under the winter rains, they bloom in the fall, they distribute their seeds, or the seeds get distributed, and then they depend on the winter rains to provide the moisture for them to get established. So if you can follow that same regimen here, which you usually could, you could get them to do well in your garden from seed. The other Brunsvigia species that I grow is very similar to Josephini. It's a little bit smaller, somewhat twisted leaves, but similar to the Josephini. And you can see the flowers are similar too. There's a little difference. These shots were taken at UC Irvine Arboretum, which I think has been closed down. I think UC Irvine wants to put not condos, but student housing there. These are in my yard. Late August to September. And they usually elicit a lot of discussion against some of my neighbors that walk past. What the heck are those? I think Jim has incorporated some of these into his garden. He has a little more knack for design, and they look, he's posted some fantastic pictures. Another close-up of the Literalis with pollen and the receptive stigma. Very easy to work with for amateur plant nerds like myself. If you want to cross them, you can snip off one of those anthers and touch the stigma on another plant. More seed. Again, if they're exposed to light, to sunlight, they will turn red, but normally they're green. And then one of my propagation efforts, I went a little crazy for a while. I planted them in 2-inch pots. You can also plant them in a community pot and then separate them. But if you leave them in a plastic tub, like the picture on the right, again, they're recalcitrant and they will germinate whether you want them to or not. Those are all salvageable, by the way. You could, individually pull those out and separate them and pot them up. So. Bosmanii is another species. It's a little bit smaller, maybe a medium-sized bulb among the Brunsvigias. They're from Namibia and northwest South Africa. Similar flower structure, an umbel, pink to white flowers. They're reported to like clay soils, which I have in my yard. And again, flat, prostrate, dark green leaves, usually pressed to the ground. And again, the bulb tip must not be planted too deep, just below the surface of the soil. And you can see the plant, the leaves themselves, the foliage is quite different. It's pressed to the ground. Interesting. You've got to have the right space for it. You can't have other plants covering it up or crowding them out. The seedlings, though, look like any other seedlings. They have upright leaves, but they, as they mature, they'll form the wider leaves that are pressed to the ground. And that's the beginning of the flowers. The young umbel. And they will eventually open up to form an almost perfect umbel that are pretty nice. Again, white to cream to pink. And that's the infructescence on the left. Seeds forming or fruit forming, and then seeds inside. And you can see my own cross down below on the right. And I think my original seeds came in that envelope from Silver Hill Seeds back in 2007. And the last Brunsvigia species that I grow is Gregaria, which is also another small to medium-sized bulb. It's a reliable bloomer for me. It does well on the ground, and but it's a little smaller. Similar ad-pressed leaves to the ground. This is my yard again. They like the rocks. They don't have to compete with anything else. And I'm a plant nerd. I want one of everything, so I've got them mixed in with some Dudleyas and Focarias and other things which are not necessarily South African. So. These are some of the other Brunsvigia species which I've not had good luck with, but they are all really impressive. Marginata is a bright red one, and Orientalis is another large species, as are the other two. These you're probably familiar with, the Clivias or Clivia, Miniata. I've just got a few of these, but they're South African. They're in the Amaryllidaceae family. They like shade, and they are evergreen if you keep them watered. I've tried a few intergeneric crosses with these and Cyrtanthus. They have not been successful. Krasne flava is another interesting Amarylid. The leaves are kind of cool. I like the hair on the edges of the leaves. And then the flowers, I haven't gotten mine to flower yet, but these are the flowers. They're pretty spectacular. Credit to Alan O'Leary in Australia, who gave me these pictures of his plants. He says they need a little incentive by burning a fire over the bulbs. Other folks have told me that's not necessarily required. If you can do that safely, it might help. He's got his potted in containers. Mine are in the ground. There are several Cyrtanthus species. It's another genus. Most are from the Eastern Cape, which generally means they grow in the summer or have foliage in the summer and require some irrigation here. For the most part, they do better in pots, but you can grow some specimens successfully in the ground here. And I've got a few of the following. Cyrtanthus falcatus, which is the shepherd's crook or fire lily. I don't know where they get the fire lily name unless it has to do with popping up after fires. But they're pretty easy to grow in the ground here, although they tend to bloom better if their roots are restricted in a pot, a large pot, like the one on the right. Here they bloom for me in February, which is kind of nice. There's not a whole lot blooming in February. And then they form their foliage, which lasts through the summer, so you have to keep it irrigated. It doesn't need a lot of water. Once a month should be fine. And Heri is another similar species. I do grow this. It is evergreen. If you look at that picture on the lower left, though, they all tend to have this dead ending on the leaves, which I find not particularly appealing. But for plant nerds, it's another plant. Question? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Cool. Did you go dig them up? And then there's Obliquus, which is another similar species. Brachycyphus. Actually, it's blocked out on my screen here, but not, yeah, okay. I've not had good luck with this species. These were growing at Berkeley Botanical Gardens, and I thought they looked nice. And I was talking to one of the horticulturists there, and he said they need summer water, and I'm probably not providing enough. Sanguineus, though, loves it here, even though it's an Eastern Cape species. I think I brought in one that I just noticed it today in a pot that was blooming, and it's on the table there. Usually they push 2 blooms on each spike. The one I brought in only has 1. And they bloom this time of year to September. And that red is pretty striking. Cyrtanthus McKennii has a small bulb, but with interesting flowers, kind of grass-like leaves. Again, needs regular H2O in the summer. So for us, probably better suited for pot culture. This is a cross between two species that is almost weed-like in that it offsets a lot. And any little bulb that gets carried away from the main bulblet will grow. So I've almost gotten rid of it because it's kind of invasive. So, but it is nice. The next Amaryllis species that I like is Hymanthes. You're probably all familiar with albifloss. It's a pretty common one, the white ones with the yellow anthers. The fruit is pretty. This is probably my favorite Hymanthes, coccineus. It's one of the red flowering Hymanthes with yellow anthers. It's a winter grower. The leaves die back completely in the summer. I remove the leaves around mine just to make them look a little cleaner. The bottom left picture is a shot from San Diego Safari Park in the Old World Garden of the leaves in winter. This is another one that's probably better for pot culture. I have it growing in the ground as well. Barkeri. It is a winter grower, so it's more suited to our climate. And Carneus, or Carneus, another winter grower from the Western Cape. Does well in pots for me. I've tried it in the ground and it doesn't seem to do as well. It tends to have flat leaves. It pressed to the ground, but the blooms are pretty, they're smaller, about the size of a softball. Again, well-drained medium, preferably inorganic soil, light shade. Most of them like light shade, or protection from the PM sun. Don't overwater, especially when they're dormant or during hot weather. And you can fertilize potted specimens with a dilute orchid fertilizer, works for me. And then there are some smaller Amaryllids, Hessia. You can grow this in the ground, but you have to be careful where you plant it, maybe a raised spot where you have more control. Scaduxus pernicius. This is a summer grower, the paintbrush lily. I grow it because I love those flowers. It does require summer water. So most of mine are in containers. It could be, I did have some in the ground at the back of my lot, and they did well. However, I suspect they're leafcutter bees, just love those leaves. And I think I have a picture later on showing them all chewed up. The fruit is really pretty too, and it lasts a long time, several months. This is another small Amaryllis truncata, better for pot culture. Those are just some seedlings. And Caruica, autumn flowering. Most of these are. The leaves are interesting, better because it's small, better for pot culture. Some Stromarias, Salteri with the pink one. I've grown that. It's bloomed for me. I don't know why I don't have my own picture. I really covet the Stromaria villosa in the upper right corner. Those were in a those were owned by Stephen Hammer, who's a big collector up in Vista, I believe. I have toyed with crossing different genus, closely related genera that have compatible DNA. They don't all have compatible DNA. But some are close enough that amateurs like myself can do it. So you can have the seed parent. Amaryllis belladonna tends to lend itself to these crosses more with Brunsvigia, and the results are usually these bright pink, almost hot pink flowers that are more similar to the Brunsvigia flowers. The only problem with these is they're all sterile, so you aren't going to be able to get seed off of these. The only way you can get this is by doing the original cross, and then it's very obvious which seeds are a good cross because they come up with blue leaves as opposed to the green leaves of Amaryllis belladonna. Crinodonna is another intergeneric cross. Alternatively, you might hear it called Amacrinum. It's a cross between Amaryllis belladonna, the naked lady, and Crinum morii is usually the seed parent. It can be crossed with some of the other crinums. I brought in a bouquet of them that are all blooming in my yard now. They're a little late. Again, everything is late this year for me. They usually start to bloom in June, and they're just starting to bloom now. The nice thing about this particular cross is if you irrigate it, it's evergreen, and it will put out 3 or 4 flushes of blooms from June through December in normal years. So it's kind of nice to have. I did make a couple crosses between Boophone and Amaryllis belladonna. This generated a lot of interest 20 years ago when I first got my first flowers. But they're just oddities. And then going beyond the Amaryllids, Velthymias or Velthemias. Bracteata is a common spring blooming bulb. They're in the hyacinth family. Thank you. That photo on the left is a grouping at the Huntington, which was incorrectly labeled, which doesn't happen too often there, but I did point it out, and I got a thank you note from the Huntington about it. Bracteata is usually pink or variations of pink. There is a yellow form, often called yellow or lemon flame, and there's a very pale yellow one that's called white sometimes. The foliage can be evergreen. It's quite pretty. It's shiny, but you have to water it to keep it evergreen. They will tolerate drought. They'll go completely dormant in the summer if you don't water them, and then they'll come back up with the fall rains. And then the other genus, the other species in that genus is Velthymia capensis, and it's a fall blooming species. It has more blue-gray leaves, which are kind of interesting. Strictly a winter grower. For me, it blooms, I can get it to bloom in September if I start watering now, but I like it to bloom a little later in October. If you wait for the fall rains, it could be as late as November or December. There are crosses between this species, capensis and Bracteata, which will bloom like in December or January. Amaryllids is another South African species. They're pretty interesting. I've had bad luck in the ground. I have problems with snails and slugs, and these are just magnets for snails and slugs. But in pots, they'll do well. There's quite a bit of color variation. All of these are spring bloomers, anywhere from February to April. And almost every color, white to blue to purple to red to yellow. Albuca, the flowers are not that impressive, although individually they're kind of interesting. This is more grown for the foliage, which is more suited to pot culture. Those crazy spiral leaves. And I do like this one, Spiralis. This does grow on the ground. I planted it in my garden, and unfortunately the leaves don't last long, which is just natural. They pop up in late fall and they will last until February. This year they lasted a little bit longer with the additional rains, and they form those curlicue leaves and then the yellow pendant flowers. They're not really large, so you know, they're individually more interesting. Other Albuca species form upright flowers. This one is called Agraby Hills, I think, for the area from which it was found. And the other Hymanthes there is Deformis, which forms huge leaves with a almost 2-foot diameter. And then that one impressive but not too showy flower in the middle. Masonia is another great species that you would grow just for the leaves. The leaves are just fantastic. Again, these tend to be snail and slug magnets for me. So I grow mine in pots. I have seen them grown successfully in the ground, and they're real impressive. You need to do it on a gravel base or a rock base, but you really have to spread the snail bait in advance. Ornithogalum, they're okay. Calla lilies, so common, but nice. Freesia laxa, that's a weed. I gave it to Jim over there, but they are nice. I've almost rid my garden of them. No, they popped up, I think, in some of the other pots that I gave Jim. It wasn't intended. Now you've got it in the garden. Yeah. But they're nice. You can't beat that red color. There's a white one also. You could do that. Ixia, you've probably all heard of Ixia. They do well here. These are both in the iris family. And then Eucomus, how can you not like that? Unfortunately, it is a summer grower. I think there is one species which is a winter grower, which I haven't acquired yet. But how can you not like those pineapple flowers? Some more irids. Casmanthe, if I'm saying that right, floribunda. Don't plant that, that's a weed here. It's nice, you could do it in a pot and make sure you snip off the seed heads before they mature. Spiraxis is a nice one, that can also be a little weedy. Crocosmia requires summer water, in my opinion. Babiana is a good one. There's red, there's blue, there are white ones. The foliage doesn't look like much, in my opinion. And you're all familiar with Tubalgia, or Am I saying that correctly? Fragrans is a nicer one than, what's the one that smells like onions? Society garlic, yeah. I got a little note here that, oops, that is an Amaryllis, so. But they do well here, as does the I'm losing my mind here. Strelitzia, the bird of paradise. If you are going to grow that, grow the Junkea, yeah, variety. Merwilla plumbea or Scilla natalensis and Watsonia are good ones. Watsonias can be a little weedy too. Problems? Well, this is what happens when the foliage matures. Not exactly the greatest looking. You should leave it in place until it's mostly brown, then, in my opinion, just remove it at that point. But for 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to have this. They are subject to mosaic virus, which is usually spread by snails and mealybugs. Also pruning shears if you're pruning other bulbs that have this mosaic virus in it. This is a common tobacco mosaic virus that affects these Amaryllids from South Africa. So there's nothing you can do about it. You need to dig the plant and destroy it. So otherwise it'll spread. If you don't give them enough light or airflow, or you water them too much, they can rot. So that's a problem. Oh, there's my chewed up Scaduxus leaves in my backyard. Again, propagation usually by seed. These were my original orders from Silver Hill back in 2007. You can do your own pollinating. This is what I do. I use a bigger brush now and just kind of, some people just wipe their hands across the flowers. Or you can be more exacting and use some tweezers. This has gotten out. This has generated questions from my neighbors when I'm kneeling down doing this. What the hell are you doing? And you can employ cheap labor. That's my niece to help with the harvest. More seeds. I have this anal retentive need to arrange things geometrically. You can grow them in community pots or you can grow them in individual pots. You can see that quickly they become too many. Unless you've got a commercial enterprise. Information sources. There's a couple of books out there. Cape bulbs was one of the, by Richard Dowd, was one of the first bulbs that I got, or books that I got interested in, and opened me up to all the other species. It's good. Richard Dowd has passed away. He used to live in Santa Barbara, I believe it was, and this book came out in the 80s. Grow Bulbs is by Graham Duncan in South Africa. Color Encyclopedia of Cape Bulbs, Clivias by Harold Kupowitz. Has he talked here? No? Okay. Then online sources, Pacific Horticulture. Pacific Bulb Society is a great source. And the Bulb Maven, Diana Chapman, she runs Tell Us Rare Bulbs up in Northern California. And there are others. Other digital sources for interest. There's various Facebook groups online. There's one specifically for African bulbs in cultures, Cyrtanthus specific genera, Amanthus, Caduxus. Or you can go to public gardens here in California, Berkeley, San Francisco, Ruth Bancroft, Huntington, and our own San Diego Botanic Garden. And if you're looking for seed or bulb sources, there's Telos up north. Bill the Bulb Baron has passed, but I think it's been taken over by some of his assistants, Jamie and Aaron. They're up, they have his growing grounds, which are near Santa Cruz, south of Santa Cruz. Again, the Pacific Bulb Society, Plant Club sales, Botanic Garden sales, friends, Facebook. Companion plants, you can do whatever you want. Some of the South African species are a logical choice, or even some of our own natives, which share the same growing conditions. But I've gone crazy with the aloes. Or now aloedendrons. Hercules is an easy one and grows quite large. Other aloes. Some of the deciduous trees and shrubs can work too. If the leaves fall off in the winter, it provides the light that the Amaryllis leaves need down below. I have an affinity for crassulas. I know they're common, but I like them. There's blue waves on the left and the silver dollar jade in the middle, and then your regular jade on the right. I tried something and it has since not worked out too well. With that euphorbia, Medusa had euphorbia in a raised pot. Well, it just kept growing and reached all the way down to the ground and covered the other plants. Calicoe bayarensis is a good one. It's almost tree-like. Honeybush or Melianthus major is a good South African plant. However, it can get kind of weedy, but the leaves are interesting and the flowers really attract birds. A lot of nectar. Be careful though, it'll stain your clothing. And then other plants. On the left is a geranium incanum that volunteered. I let it grow. That's on the corner of my lot. Its only source of water where her moisture was from the dogs that used to make a stop there. Crassula pruinosa in the center, and Crassula pubescens of species rupestris with the red leaves is pretty nice. And that's it. Questions? Did I go over?
I have a question. Can you hear me, Ken? Ken, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Gophers will not bother Amaryllids, because most of them are toxic. They might tunnel underneath them, but if they bite a root, they leave it alone because they must sense that it's toxic. The only problem I've had is underneath my Hymanthus coccineus. They tunneled a lot underneath that and it upset the bulbs, but I mean, they got all cockeyed, but they still bloomed. I suspect so. They're probably full of belladonna alkaloids, which are probably not good to eat. Yeah. I could offer you some to try. I'll have. Oh, because they look like peas. You could offer some pea soup, huh?
So you mentioned hybrids a number of times. Really fun, actually. You do all of it yourself then?
I have other people have done them, but yes, I do my own. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question from Scott was, about hybrids, do I do my own hybridization? And the answer is yes. Other people have done it. It's not that uncommon. It's you know, these plants are made for amateurs like me. You know, other plants that can be easily hybridized and are bearded German iris, and there's a lot of others. So, but yes, I do all my own hybridization. I have done frozen pollen, yeah. For species which don't bloom at the same time, you say, well, how do you do that? Well, if you cut the stamens with the anthers intact, in my opinion, I set them down on wax paper, let them dry for a couple days, and then I'll put them in a little plastic container and stuff them in the kitchen or freezer section. And when the other plant is ready for pollination, I just take them out and use tweezers to pollinate. The stigma, the receptive stigma. At one point it was, I'm not doing that so much anymore, but yes, at one point I had all these Tupperware containers, small ones with different seeds. And the problem was I put tape on them with the names, but in the freezer, the tape curled off. And so it fell off. And then I was like, what was this? So you have to do something better than tape.
Ken, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Scott.
These that grow flat out the ground.
Uh-huh. Prostrate, not prostate, that's something else.
What do you think? Why did those plants do that?
Why? I think that might be part of it. They tend to grow where there's not a lot of competition from other plants. From what I've read anyways, I actually haven't seen them in nature. I'd love to go to South Africa someday and see them. Jim?
Here's a question. South Africa leaves around. And we think it has.
With dew?
Yeah, it has hairs on the end. And
Dewdrops? Maybe. Yeah, that's a possibility.
There's a question online.
Oh, okay. Check audio settings. No. How long can you grow Boophone seedlings in a pot before transplanting into the garden? I usually do that at year 2, sometimes year 3. You don't have to do it that quickly, but it's advised to up pot them. If you germinate them in 4-inch containers, I would up pot them to 1 gallon at year 2, and then to the ground after that. Again, their roots are perennial. All of the Amaryllis roots are perennial, and most of them like a big spread. They want to let the roots run. My Amaryllis belladonna, which bloomed for years in the ground, is no longer blooming. Is it just this year?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, because mine, I brought a few cut naked ladies in, and normally by this time I'd have hundreds, and I doubt if I had a dozen. Hasn't bloomed the last 3 or 4 years. It's not, you didn't cover it up, did you, with dirt, or did it get covered up with dirt? Or not enough sunlight? They do need sun. They need at least half a day of sun. Yeah, sun is pretty critical for Amaryllis belladonna. At least a half a day.
Are there any questions? Yes.
What lilies? Spider lilies. They're similar. they're in this same family, Amaryllidaceae, but those are of Japanese origin. And they will grow here. They require a little more water in the summer. The question was spider lilies, which are, I'm trying to remember the botanic name. Lycoris, thank you, Jason. Thank you. You can grow them here, but they require summer water. At least some, not necessarily a lot. Some of the species, Lycoris species, actually like more winter chill than we can provide, at least coastally. I grew them for a while. I lived pretty close to the coast, and they did okay. Those that I had at the bottom of my lot, where it got the chilliest, seemed to do better. The others not so much, but that could have been other issues as well. Yes. That's generally true. No summer water because they've gone dormant. No foliage. You can water them, and Graham Duncan, the horticulturist from the big garden in Johannesburg. Thank you. Is it Johannesburg? Yeah. Cape Town. He wrote that his opinion was a single drenching, a good drenching in the late summer, anywhere from 14 to 30 days before they would normally bloom, is advantageous. It may help the plant if it's really drought starved. It's already formed the flower bud in the bulb. If it's really stressed, it'll just reabsorb that, according to Graham Duncan. It'll reabsorb that flower bud. So a single irrigation in late summer before they normally bloom is probably helpful. Any others online? Does send out leaves in winter. Most of them do.
That's referring to the.
Oh, the question, yeah. She said it does send out leaves, and did she respond in full sun, not covered? That's unusual because they usually are reliable bloomers. Do the leaves look healthy? Is the other question. If they've got the mosaic virus, that can affect bloom. They will continue to live for many years, but they won't bloom. And it would be apparent in the leaves. The leaves would have broken white streaks on it, variegation. Yeah. There could be other reasons. Mealy bugs are sometimes a problem. They'll get down. I haven't had this problem myself, but I have seen it. Yeah, I would say dig and replant, look at the individual bulbs, make sure they're solid. Occasionally, if they're rotten, they'll continue to grow, but they won't be healthy. So I dig them up, look at the individual bulbs, try to save the roots if you can, and replant. Any others? Thank you.